Don't be foolish. We have gone through the Proverbs and looked at a number of subjects that God has given us his wisdom about in our daily lives, that if we want to be wise people, we will see these things the way God does. We will practice these behaviors or mindsets and attitudes when it comes to these subjects within our own life if we want to be wise. And I hope this study has been good for you over the last few weeks that we've done it, including today. There are 2 left, and so we're reaching the near end of it, but I pray it's been a blessing to you in some way or shape. And yesterday I went to Norman. I parked. I walked a mile or so to a stadium. As I walked there, everywhere I looked, there was alcohol everywhere. I mean, that's just the case, isn't it? There's tailgates where people, the primary thing they do at these tailgates typically is drink. And you walk by store after store, and they have these huge, coolers of alcohol everywhere, and every ad on the window is about alcohol. And it used to be in the stadium you couldn't drink, and that changed a number of years ago. And you go in the stadium, and people throw away their beer, and they get into the stadium, and the first thing they buy is another beer. And then you sit in the stands, and I was just kind of looking around yesterday going, I think our subject for our lesson tomorrow is not going to be very popular. And then we started watching the game, and everyone who had a beer, they went to get about 4 more because it was not good. And I thought, this really isn't going to be very popular. But we need to talk about it, because I don't know how often alcohol is talked about or preached on. Sometimes we stay away from it. We're afraid to say some things, or we don't want to offend anybody. But yet God speaks about alcohol, and we need to too. And we need to believe what God says about it. I want you to imagine, what if we got beamed onto earth like we were aliens for a second, and we knew nothing about alcohol except for what we saw in commercials and on billboards and street signs? Imagine we knew nothing about alcohol except for, the things the media kind of portrays to us. Do you know what we would conclude? I think we would conclude that alcohol is a lot of fun. I mean, have you ever seen a commercial where people are unhappy drinking? No. We'd say alcohol is fun. People always seem to be happy on these commercials and billboards and things like that when they're drinking. We would probably conclude that good times need alcohol, wouldn't we? Because you see people drinking at sports games, hangouts with friends, holidays, date nights, vacations, really any celebration for any reason at all, they provide alcohol. We would probably conclude that alcohol is a great medication. I mean, one of the ways we're kind of told why alcohol is so great in our culture is because, if you're stressed or you're frustrated or if you're bored, go get a drink. And that will fix all of those things for you. We would probably conclude pretty and healthy people drink alcohol. Like if you want to be attractive physically, drink alcohol. You ever notice that in commercials that most people that they have in them are pretty attractive physically? They have nice jaw lines and they have 6-packs of abs. They don't really show you the beer belly, do they? No, you go, oh yeah, we connect attractive people with drinking. If you ever notice, if you were to look at our culture, you'd probably conclude that interesting and sophisticated people drink alcohol, right? There's that commercial about the most interesting man in the world. And what does he do? Well, he drinks. Alcohol companies link their products to only positive emotions, only to positive experiences and positive attitudes. And they paint this picture about drinking and alcohol that seems really nice, don't they? And I would just ask you this morning, is that a realistic picture of what alcohol does in someone's life? They don't want to show that part, do they? Because a realistic picture of alcohol is this. On average, there are more than 178,000 deaths every year attributed to excessive alcohol abuse. That's the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. 2 years ago, there were 13,524 alcohol-impaired driving fatalities. That accounts for 1/3 of all driving fatalities. In fact, just this past week or two, I believe, they sentenced somebody to jail in Yukon who was drunk driving and killed a 16-year-old girl 2 years ago. We've had multiple DUIs that have had fatalities involved within Oklahoma City just this year. The World Health Organization estimates that roughly 55% of domestic abuse perpetrators were drinking alcohol prior to assault. I'm not going to say that alcohol is the reason they did that, but it sure brought out something within them. 2/3 of victims of spousal abuse report that the perpetrator had been drinking at the time of the incident or incidents. Alcohol is a known carcinogen. Do you know what that word means? Means that alcohol is a known risk of developing several types of cancer. It's a known drug. Alcohol, the realistic picture, leads to worse health, worse decision making, and it negatively impacts all kinds of relationships. A realistic picture looks like broken spirits, broken homes, looks like damaged relationships, and diseased bodies. That's more of a realistic picture. You know, there's plenty of debate by Christians about alcohol, isn't there? I mean, let's be honest, in the church, for many, many, many years, and I'm not foolish, and for many more years to come, there's plenty of debate about alcohol. I hope we can all agree this morning that drunkenness is clearly a sin. I mean, Scripture says that over and over and over again. You know, in Galatians chapter 5 and verse 21, it's called a work of the flesh as opposed to a work of the Spirit. That when our flesh is at work, not the Spirit, one fruit that's produced, well, he says drunkenness. He calls it a sin. In Ephesians 5 and verse 18, Christians were commanded then, just as they are today, he says, do not get drunk on wine, but be filled with the Spirit. Time and time again, being drunk is referred to as a sin. And the Bible calls it that, and it still is true today. But then there comes the debate, right? Well, does God ever explicitly say alcohol is sinful? Does God say, where is the line that God draws? Is it not a matter of Christian liberty? You know, Romans 14, can we not have our opinions and not judge our brother or sister on the matter? And there's those questions about, well, when does somebody become drunk? I get it, drunkenness is a sin, but, you know, how much alcohol until they're drunk? Can I have 1 sip, 2 sips, 1 drink, 2 drinks, 4, 5? You know, what's the measurement that where I cross the line? And I know this debate has many passages and word choices, and there's points brought up, and I've looked at those. And I just want you to understand this morning, this sermon is not about the debate. Okay, that's not what we're doing. I'm not going to answer all those questions this morning. You don't want to sit here for a 60-minute sermon, I don't think. This morning, I want to share with you what the Proverbs writers say is wise behavior when it comes to alcohol. Because Proverbs really doesn't get involved in the debate. The Proverbs writer, their goal wasn't to prove where is the line of sin when it comes to alcohol. Because what they're trying to do is say, this is what wise behavior looks like when it comes to this drink. This is maybe the best practice about it. He's not worried about, is it sin? Remember what we talked about at the beginning of this whole series? Wise people, they don't live by the question, is it sin? What do they live by? Is it what? Wise. And that's what he wants to address. And I think sometimes in our attempts to justify our decisions, or sometimes when we try to live by is drinking a sin, or how much is it until it's a sin, sometimes what we do is we actually throw wisdom out the window and attempt just to say, well, I didn't sin. And this morning what I would like to do is simply just read together 3 passages in Proverbs all about alcohol, look at some of the thoughts that are said and shared, and then maybe wrap up with just some thoughts for us of if we're going to be wise when it comes to this, here's what we need to understand. So if you have your Bible, look at Proverbs chapter 20. Proverbs 20. All of these passages are from Proverbs 20 to the end. So if you have your Bible and want to flip there, these are all in the later half of the book. And by the way, I understand this morning that many of our lives maybe have been impacted by alcohol, that there's probably people within here just basing this on the numbers that struggle with this very sin. Look, listen, we love you, and this is not a judgment upon what you struggle with, because we all have our temptations and our issues. But this is just the truth that we do need to share to every generation that comes along. And so we love you. We're not here to, to do anything about that or to make you feel bad. We're just trying to share the truth this morning. But Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 1. Here's the first piece of wisdom or passage about alcohol that I want to look at this morning. It's the smallest one. Proverbs 20 and verse 1. It says this: wine is a mocker, strong drink a brawler, and whoever is intoxicated by it is not wise. Now, 2 little notes just about this verse. The first is that word strong drink. We know what wine is. Strong drink, that's a reference to really any alcohol that isn't wine. Any grain-made alcohol, that's kind of the reference there. But he says strong drink, that's what that's referencing. The other thing I would note too is that word mocker. Wine is a mocker. Another word for that, or the same word for that, would be scoffer. And scoffer within the book of Proverbs is a character that not only is called unwise, but they're like an anti-wisdom character. They're like, not even do they think, it's not that they just live an unwise life, but they don't even give me wisdom. Like, I'm not interested in it in any way. You share with me wisdom, I laugh at it. That's the kind of way the scoffer in this book is characterized. But I want you to notice just from this verse some of the truths shared about drunkenness. One, alcohol alters your behavior. You notice that? It makes a mocker and a brawler. Not that that's who you were before, before you were drinking, before you got drunk, but yet as you participate in this and then you lost your sobriety, you became something different. It alters the way you behave. And for example, think about any drunk fan at a ball game. Right? Think about people after they've been at a bar or a club for some time. Like, you start to see their behavior change. It's interesting how, if you have season tickets to a game, we see this all the time for the last few years of people come up and they're one way, and by the end of the game, they're completely different. They smiled at the beginning. They were super, super angry by quarter two. I've seen people at games where they have Jesus tattoos on their arm, but yet they're cussing out the coach by quarter three. Really quarter one, if I'm being honest. It alters your behavior. Like, that's not the way you normally behave. I don't speak like that. I don't act like that. I don't do this typically. But when this comes in me, when I drink, I'm not myself. I lose my inhibition. I lose my wise decision making, and I'm influenced for the negative. It alters our behavior. Notice it makes you somebody you don't want to be. I don't think anybody sets out to become violent, angry, abusive, verbally or physically. I don't think anyone sets out to be promiscuous or unfaithful. Yet when they are drinking, these things become more likely. If we wanted to go to Subway across the street for lunch, there's probably not security guards outside of Subway because they're not worried about people acting like, crazy people. But there are security guards outside of bars, clubs, sports events, and all that. Why? Because they expect when people get drunk, what happens? They start acting like a fool. If you've ever watched Dr. Phil, and I don't claim to be like a big Dr. Phil person, I know it's a shocker, but I always used to laugh at these, but it's not really funny. If Dr. Phil would talk to someone who's the dad who struggles with alcohol, and he gets drunk and comes home at night and treats his kids or his wife one way, and I remember Dr. Phil said one time, Frank, you're not a monster. You're only a monster when you're drunk. And that's my Dr. Phil impression for you this morning. But we get the idea, don't we? Of you become somebody you are not when this gets within you. And I think about who we are as Christians, or we want to be as God's people. I'm not going to live like one of God's people or one of God's children when this is within me. I'm going to live contrary to who God wants me to be. It brings out the evil within us, you might say. Like, there are parts of us that we don't like, these little attitudes and things within our heart, yet when we drink and we get drunk, we become someone we're not meant to be. He says there at the end, whoever is intoxicated by it is not wise. I think that's a pretty impactful statement. If you get intoxicated by it, you are not wise, which that's been the whole point of this book and this lesson. I want to share more passages with you just for time's sake. I don't want to hold on here too much, but notice how this affects us and impacts us in our life and how it changes us. But he continues on. Proverbs 23, starting in verse 29. This was our scripture reading this morning. And in this passage, you find many questions that all come to the same answer, to answer these questions. In Proverbs 23 and verse 29, we'll read it again. It says, who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has contentions? Who has complaining? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? He says, the answer is those who linger long over wine. Those who go to taste mixed wine. Mixed wine would just be basically a way to make the drink stronger. He says, do not look on the wine when it's red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it goes down smoothly. In the end, it bites like a serpent. It stings like an adder. Your eyes will see strange things. Your heart will utter perverse things. You'll be like the one who lies down in the midst of the sea, like the one who lies on top of a mast. They struck me, you will say, but I was not hurt. They beat me, but I didn't feel it. When shall I awake? I must have another drink. A few things about this passage. All these questions have the same answer. This is a larger passage in Proverbs 23. It's all about self-control with other subjects, but he gets to alcohol, and he says the answer is the same. The one who has all of these issues is the one who goes to wine and mixed wine. He says drunks have increased sorrow and woe. They get into more trouble and problems. That's just the truth. Strife and complaining, that's a result of abusing alcohol. It creates more issues in relationships, in work, at home. It creates more issues all over. He says the one who turns to it, who gets intoxicated, not only does it cause these issues in their life, but also it causes issues for their health. He says red eyes, and who has these wounds they can't even explain. I don't know if you've ever woke up from sleep and your eyes are a little swollen or bruised, tender. You're like, did I hit myself in the middle of the night? Could you imagine just waking up with bruises and cuts and things of that nature and having no idea where they came from? Because that's the realistic truth about this life. And verse 33 and 34, it's not just what it brings in your life, but also he says it mentally impairs you. He would say, oh, there you go. You'll see strange things, hallucinations. You'll have distorted judgment. You'll say things you never thought you would say when you're drunk. He would say also, he compares how you're going to feel to being on almost like a raft in the middle of the sea. I don't know if any of you have ever been on a cruise, but when you first get on a cruise, you have to kind of get adjusted to how much the boat rocks on the water. When I've been on one, and my mom made us take what is that? I don't know. Dramamine, right? Is that it? Thank you. However you pronounce it. Drama, tomato. But you kind of get used to that. He says, this is the truth. Drunkenness, you can barely stand, and then when you go to sleep, you feel like you're in the middle of the ocean on a raft. That doesn't sound pleasant, does it? But yeah, that's the truth of this behavior. He says, this person is hurt, and they can't even tell because they've lost their senses. And then the sad truth is, for the one who abuses alcohol, they wake up, he says, and they look to drink all over again, just to add this suffering to their life. And listen, I get it. We may say, okay, I get the truth. I get it impacts our life. I get it can have all these physical consequences when we get drunk. But listen, I can participate in this and not get drunk. I mean, that's usually our reply to this, right? I get there's these issues, but I can control myself. I can keep myself away from that. I would just want you to think about this. In Apache, Oklahoma, there is a rattlesnake festival. I promise this will connect. There is a rattlesnake pit like this with hundreds and hundreds of rattlesnakes. And listen, there's probably a chance you can get in there and stand there and not get bit, right? There's a chance. There's a percentage chance. Do you want to take that chance? First of all, I'm never living or moving to a place like Apache. If you have a town where you can have a rattlesnake festival and you have that many snakes, I'm out. Okay, I'm just out. But we would probably say, look at that and say, I'm not even going to take the chance, right? Why would I want to get bitten by that? And listen to what he says about alcohol. In the end, it bites like a serpent and it stings like an adder, or a viper, your version may say. Look, it looks nice. That's what he's saying. It looks nice. It sounds nice. It seems appealing. I get it. He understands, but yet he says, but it's not as nice as it seems. Now, it will bite you, and you will come to regret getting close to it. And that's what he's getting at with this section. It causes all of these extra problems in your life, and while it may seem appealing, and our world definitely finds it appealing, and it wants to make it seem appealing to us, he says, it is not what it seems. Don't be fooled by the promises that it seems. Don't be fooled by its appearance. It's far worse than you can believe. And so why chance it, he's almost saying. And then one last one for you. Proverbs 31. Right? We could think of Proverbs 31 as the Proverbs, 31 woman. There's a little section, before that. But in this section, It's King, and I don't know how to say this correctly, but King, Lemuel or something. King Lemmy. But in this section, he's a king. We have no recording of who this king is. It very well maybe this is not an Israelite king, because they recorded their kings very well, and we have no recording of him. This could be like a name for another person, maybe Solomon. We don't know. But in this section, this is actually his mother writing to him. You ever heard the phrase, "Mama knows best"? Throughout Proverbs, there's a lot of wisdom that comes from women, and this is one section. But here about alcohol in verse 4 through 7, this mother writes to her son, a king, and says this: "It is not for kings. It is not for kings to drink wine, or for rulers to desire strong drink, for they will drink and forget what is decreed, and pervert the rights of the afflicted. Give strong drink to him who is perishing, and wine to him whose life is bitter. Let him drink and forget his poverty, and remember his trouble no more." You just pause there for a moment. What this mother is saying to her son, the king, this oracle she's taught him, she reminds him, hey, you have important business to conduct. You have a duty. She'd go on to say that your duty is to help the poor and the needy, to do justice. And what she's getting at is alcohol will get in your ability to lead well. Alcohol will get in the way of your responsibilities. She kind of says to him here, it's not for kings, to drink wine. What she gets at here is you have better things to do than just sit around and drink. Sitting around and drinking is a pastime now. No one ever invited me to go split a 6-pack of Diet Coke. No one's ever called me and said, hey, I got a brand new bottle of sweet tea. Want to crack it open and split it? No one's ever done that. But have you ever been called and say, hey, do you want to split this glass of wine? This bottle of wine? You want to come get a 12-pack and go sit? It's a pastime, isn't it? And what his mother's actually kind of getting at is, listen, she doesn't encourage that behavior. She's clearly advising him not to get drunk. And in some ways, she may even be saying, hey, just stay away from it at all. That's what she's getting at. And we'd say, okay, I get it, but I'm not a king. I don't have all these people I'm over. Do you lead anybody in your life? Children? Spouse? Coworkers? Friends? Are you influential in any way? Do you have any important responsibilities in life? Do you make any important decisions? If so, alcohol is not a help to those, it's actually a hindrance. It's interesting. You kind of see this on TV, and I've even seen it in real life. People be like, hey, I got this situation in life, I have to make an important decision, I'm really stressed. And have someone say, how about we go to the bar, drink, and discuss it? Because, if anything will help us make wise decisions, it'll be getting drunk and then making a decision. But that's what she's getting at, is you're not going to make wise decisions when you're intoxicated. See, drunkenness does not help us fulfill any of our important roles and functions within the home or work or the church. It hinders us. It doesn't help us. And these passages in Proverbs, just these 3, do you not sense a consistent theme and message here? They're all spoken of as alcohol can be very negative in your life, so be cautious and careful. And God shared this wisdom not because he's mean, but God shared this because he wants us to be wise and to not be foolish. And as I think about all of these passages, it just reminds me of this one New Testament passage. Peter said this: be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Satan is currently on this earth, going from place to place, looking for people's souls that he can snatch. Looking for people to eat up. And he's looking for yours. And one way he might try to do that is through the influence of alcohol. He'll try to snatch up your marriage. He will try to devour your influence with your children. He will try to devour your family. Teens, he wants to devour your future through alcohol. He wants our minds, our bodies, our heart. He wants our soul, and he is roaring around looking for the chance. And the answer, Peter said, is to be what? Sober-minded. And here's the truth. You cannot be of clear focus when you're intoxicated. You wouldn't want to get in a car with someone who isn't sober, would you? So why would we want to navigate our life and our goal of being with God forever without a sober mind either. That is the point he's getting at. And this morning, if I could sum up these thoughts, because listen, I'm not trying to answer all the debate questions this morning, and I'm not trying to say things God hasn't explicitly said. But I think we can say this. If we think alcohol doesn't negatively impact us, we're foolish. If we think this thing is perfectly fine, and there's no barriers for it, and we shouldn't be cautious, we are foolish. We're just ignoring the truth about it. It will negatively impact our life. If we read these texts and others and we think alcohol is good as long as we don't get drunk, right? As long as we don't pass out or are throwing up or are hungover the next day, we're fine. I think we're foolish. No one really knows the line of when we're absolutely drunk, right? Is it 2 drinks? Is it 3? I know this, the more you drink, the less sober you become. The more intoxicated you become. And if we think it's just fine as long as we're not hammered, we're foolish. That's what the Proverbs writer says. You know what he also says? If we don't practice caution and concern with alcohol, we're foolish. Do we think about how this impacts our reputation and influence? Do we think about what our kids are seeing? Do we think about how we're influencing our friends and our brothers and sisters within the church with how we consume or how we treat alcohol? Listen, be wise when it comes to this subject. And I would say this too. If we don't consider how it affects others in our life, we're foolish. Romans 14 would say, don't judge your brothers as they make these kind of decisions over disputed matters. Listen, we're not sharing this truth today so that when you meet a brother or sister within the Southwest Church of Christ who maybe views alcohol a little bit differently than you on this disputed matter, or they practice maybe it a little differently than you do, that you're going to judge them and condemn them. That's not the point of this message, okay? So please don't do that. It's a whole different thing if you go see your brother drunk, tomorrow. That's different. But we're not here to judge in that way. We want to follow Paul's command there. But another way this is true is this. How it affects others is don't ever put a stumbling block in front of a brother or sister. I hope you understand that you have brothers or sisters who really struggle with alcohol. I mean, it is the temptation of all temptations in their life. And when we go to dinner and we drink in front of them, or when we invite them to places where that is happening all over, we are not influencing them for good. When we post pictures about it all over, we're not really influencing people to live wisely. We need to be very careful about the stumbling blocks that we might be putting in place for others, and how maybe what we're doing, while we think we can control it, maybe our brother or sister can't. And so he says, be so very careful, because if we're not, he would say we're being foolish. And that's the truth. And I would end you with this. This is the wisdom from God in Proverbs about alcohol. The world, while they love alcohol, not all of the world thinks God is crazy about what he says. The CDC, and I know not everyone's a fan of the CDC recently. Here's what they said about alcohol. If you don't currently drink, they recommend you don't start for any reason. The CDC said that. What? They said it doesn't produce any good in your life. They say if you excessively drink, you need to drink less. They say if you moderately drink, they say you need to drink less. But if you go to their website right now, it will say that. If you don't currently drink, don't start for any reason. I would just beg of you this. Hey, if you're not drinking, why start? What good is it really going to do in your life? You very well may be able to handle it with caution and care, but what's far more likely is you'll come to regret that decision. So why even try? That's what they say. And that's the wisdom of Proverbs. That's the wisdom of Solomon. That's the wisdom of God throughout Scripture. I know that's not a popular lesson. I very well know that's probably not my favorite lesson for you. But that is the truth about what God says about drinking. And in our world, if we're going to be a light in a city on a hill, we can't do that while intoxicated. There's no way. And so let's be wise about alcohol. Listen, this morning, let's be wise with our lives. Let's think about what we're doing and how it's affecting our souls, our marriages, our homes, our brothers and sisters, our work, all of our responsibilities. Let's be very wise, especially with a subject and with something that is so very popular all around us. This morning, if you struggle with alcohol, that's a very, sensitive subject in your life, if you want to talk to someone about that, there's plenty of people here that you can come talk to one-on-one. It may be in your life that, I have been publicly drunk before brothers and sisters, and everyone knows, and you want to ask for forgiveness, we will hug your neck and forgive you. It may be that you need help this morning, and I don't claim to be a professional or a counselor or anything like that, but we as a church want to encourage you and help you find the help you need so that you can beat this temptation, that you can live a wiser and a healthier life. And maybe there's something else going on in your life, and you need prayers for that. Or it may be that you need to put on Jesus Christ, that you want to live wisely, and you want to have a fear of the Lord, and you want to be with him forever in eternity, and so you want to obey the gospel. If any of those are your need, we give you an opportunity to come forward or to talk to someone else right now while we stand and while we sing.